Right, good morning everyone and welcome to today's Planning Committee meeting. I am Councillor Caroline Karimi Govanlu and I will be chairing the Planning Committee meeting today. On the top table from Planning is Matthew Blackie, Sarah Everard, Martin Clark is in the room and Tracy Lincoln. Also have Eleanor Lamming, who's Vice Chair, and Lucy from Democratic Services. We are not expecting a fire drill today, but if the alarm does sound, the fire exits are clearly marked in green. And this meeting is being live streamed. Members of the public are welcome to film proceedings as long as they are not disruptive to the conduct of the meeting. If anyone wishes to film record this meeting, please identify yourselves now. Nobody, thank you. Please can you ensure all your mobile phones and electronic devices are turned to silent. Councillors, please do not use your mobile phone whilst the committee is in session. We will have comfort breaks if needed at various times throughout the meeting. If you must use your mobile, then please leave the room. However, you will appreciate that this could result in you not being able to vote on the matter under discussion at the time you leave the room. The order of business is as set out on the agenda. Members of the public can only speak if prior arrangements have been made in accordance with the Council's scheme of public speaking. The time allocated is a maximum of 5 minutes per speaker parish council. Only people who have registered to speak will be able to address the committee. The order will be as follows. The planning officer will present the application. Public speakers will then be asked to present their case, followed by questions from members of the committee to clarify something the speaker has said and not to invite the speaker to put further points across. The order of public speaking is Town Parish Council first, followed by objectors and finally supporters. Council members who are not members of this committee will then be invited to speak for the allocated time of a maximum of 5 minutes per speaker. I don't think we have anybody today, do we? Lucy, no? Okay. The committee will then discuss and determine the application. Finally, there is no provision for members of the public to circulate documents, photographs, etc. at the meeting. Are there any questions before I open the meeting? Okay. Item 1, declarations of interest. I will just say myself, I think some of us have been emailed by Rural Solutions for the first application and also for the last application. Are there any further ones? Jo.
Yes, Chair, thank you. I have been lobbied by both the applicants of the Little Plumstead, both applications in Little Plumstead, and also Little Plumstead is in the watershed catchment area of the Broads Internal Drainage Board, and I am a board member. Thank you.
Thank you. Nigel?
Similarly, I'm a board member on the Broads Internal Drainage Board.
Okay, anybody else? No? Okay, we'll go to apologies, please. Lucy, have you got any apologies?
Yes, Chair, we have apologies from Councillor Orber and Councillor Tipple.
Thank you. We just need to confirm the minutes of the meeting of the Planning Committee held on the 26th of February. Are there any matters arising from those minutes? Are you happy to approve those? Yeah, thank you very much. Okay, we'll go to applications. The first one is 2023 369199 Little Plumstead. It's land east of Churchfield. And Sarah, are you ever presenting this one? Thank you.
Thank you. So this is an application for 10 dwellings on land east of Churchfield in Little Plumstead. The site has previously received full planning permission for 7 dwellings, which was granted back in 2018, and one of those dwellings has been built under that original consent, so it remains extant. So in terms of the site's location, Little Plumstead is sort of split into 2 sections. We've got part of Little Plumstead up here and here as well. And then we've got Great Plumstead to the south here. And this site is located just where that orange star is. So in terms of the site location itself, it's on agricultural land that forms part of the ownership of Manor House Farm. So Manor House Farm located here is a listed building, as is the Octagon Barn. The Octagon Barn and the complex here has been converted. So Octagon Barn does weddings and events, and the wider barns also provide sort of employment and business use. in terms of the site, we've got this land here is then the parkland setting for Manor House Farm, and then we've got the agricultural land where the site is. Where we've got that slight dip in the red line boundary that you can see here, that is where the dwelling that has been built is. So, and we'll see some photos of that in due course. Just to the south here, we've then got that more recent built part of Little Plumstead, and then we've got quite a thick dividing line with the trees in this area, and these trees to the south here are all protected by TPO. We'll come on to some photos of that sort of separation in due course. So again, so this just to show the red line for the site, and you can see obviously the applicants own that wider land around it as well, which is shown in blue. So I'm just going to start off with, in terms of this application, going through the history, so where we're up to before taking you through what we're looking at under this new application. I thought it would be helpful to explain that site history. So the original application, which came in, which is this top application here, came in 2016, and this was granted in 2018. This gave consent for 7 dwellings. So we've got 6 dwellings here, and then a larger property set to the north of the site here. So at the time that this consent was granted, the council was unable to demonstrate a 5-year housing land supply, and members at the time gave consideration to the fact it was going to be a self-build development and would also be all provided at passive house standard. The design of the site was a loose crescent-based design, which was designed to allow gaps between the dwellings, to allow that views through between the parkland and the farmland. So then just slightly more recently, in terms of last year, we had an application to vary that proposal. So in terms of the scheme, it's plot 3, which is this one I'm just circling here. That's the one that has been built, which we'll show you in the photographs. Plot 6 has been sold separately, so that plot has been sold. So this plot is going to still form part of this new application, but it's been sold separately, and the 2024 application just came in to slightly rotate the position of that dwelling. So in terms of some of the numbers, they are going to change as we get onto the new scheme and sort of the additional dwellings within it. So just in terms of the design, obviously they were all proposed to be built to passive house standard under this is the original consent, the 2016 application, and you can see there's this 2-storey flat roof design. And again, this was then that slightly larger plot, which was going to be located to the north of the site. So, and we do have the benefit, it was plot 3, it's now called plot 4, just to confuse slightly because of the change in the numbering, but this is what has been built on the site from that original consent. And I think just at the rear there is a 2-storey garage section, so it's got office space above it, and then that's to the rear of that dwelling. So you can see that design sort of style coming to life a little bit more. So in terms of where we are now and what we're looking at under this application, so that previous consent was a full planning application. This is now looking at an outline planning consent with all matters reserved. The outline consent now is for 10 dwellings, which would be 11 in total across this road, but obviously we've got that one now known as plot 4 that has already been built out. As an outline consent, it's proposing to be a self-build development, and it's using a plot passport approach. So where we've got the different colours that you can see on the screen here, the concept of that is the darker blue areas will be 2-storey, the lighter blue areas will be 1-storey, and the lilac areas, that's going to be the garages for the development. And where you've got those orange lines along the front, that's all going to be that's supposed to be the principal elevations. So the plot passport approach is designed to guide applicants when they come in through the reserve matters of the form that would be acceptable. So in terms of the layout and where officers have concerns with this design, obviously the previous design was a relatively loose-grained development which allowed for those gaps and views through between the parkland and the agricultural land either side, and we'll see some photographs of that in a bit. This is now a much denser development, and I appreciate in terms of when we're talking about density, this isn't as dense as some of the developments, estate-style developments that you will be seeing as members when they come to committee, but bearing in mind the location, We are basically in what was part of an agricultural field within a very rural setting. This is quite a dense urbanised form of development with a very linear, built form being proposed. It's also, there's not very spacious gaps between the properties, so particularly sort of in this area here, we've got these two, which will be quite, this is the existing quite large dwelling, and this will be one that's also proposed to be quite a large dwelling. We've then got three much smaller dwellings, which will be proposed in the middle. Obviously, as self-build, applicants will have some opportunity to choose their design of the dwelling. Obviously, we're lacking that spaciousness between the plots, so they're going to be quite tight together, and sometimes with self-build it helps to have a little bit more space around them so that they're seen sort of in their own setting, whereas this is going to be quite that much tighter, more urbanised grain of development, which is where officers' concerns in terms of that impact on the landscape character is coming from. So this is just to take you on. So this is just a small example from part of that plot passport, which shows you in a little bit more detail the sort of the building heights and things that they would be proposing, and this has been put forward by the applicants. So to take you through some photographs from the site now, this is just taken from just inside the access. So the road which sweeps off in this direction here, that's the exit from the Octagon Barns complex, and then this is off on a road, a sort of a spur, which is then will provide the access to the dwellings, which will start just beyond that hedgerow. So what is there now will now be plot 4, so there would be 3 dwellings in that location. So this is just to take you around the individual plots here. So this is plot 1, which is the one closest to the road. Plot 2. And again, you can sort of begin to see, obviously, plot 4 that has been constructed, and particularly that garage to the rear. Plot 3. And then, obviously, we jump plot 4 because that's already been built. Plot 5 and 6. 7. 8. 9, 10, and then we're at the top of the site here, which is plot 11. I think what's sort of key is obviously it's trying to show it in that wider setting. So this is just looking back from the top of the site, looking down. There's an existing pond located in this area here, which serves part of, which I think also forms part of the drainage and is associated with the barns, which are just across here. But I think what we can see is beginning to see that very open character of this area. So this is the views from the site entrance. So what I just wanted to show here is, obviously we talked about where that newer development in Little Plumstead is. It is quite separated from this area, so we've got that quite thick area of trees and tree coverage there. So that does create that natural feeling of separation and that more, and you sort of feel separated from that area and that more verdant rural feeling as to the north here. Okay, so what I've done is I've got some photographs taken from around the site. I've tried to put little stars from where I've taken the photographs, just so to give you a bit of an idea. So this is to the south. This is from Hospital Road. This photo is taken approximately 170 metres from where the building is. So we can just see at the moment the top of this building is being visible from Hospital Road. And of course, the building line as proposed within this new development will come further forward with that. So there'll be 3 located closer to this road along here, so that would make that more visible from this location. So this photo is taken from the west of the site looking east. So this is taken from Broadland. There's just a little pull-in here, sort of an informal passing place. So it's just taken from there, and what you can start to see is this is the view across the parkland. So this is taken from approximately 270 metres from the site, and you can see the visibility of the existing building that has been constructed here. Obviously, I would say this photo was taken yesterday, so obviously the trees aren't out yet. Once the trees are out, that would reduce that visibility slightly, but it is very visible from Broad Lane at the moment. Again, so this is taken from the east of the site. There is a public footpath that runs along the side of the next field. The public footpath runs between sort of 2 hedgerows here. A more recent hedgerow is sort of the one closer to the development, I would say, but there are gaps within that. So this is taken at the very start of that public footpath, and I think what you can see is the building that has been built is very prominent in that landscape. So this is taken from approximately 240 metres away from the site. It is appearing very prominently from that public footpath in that location. And obviously this is where you would then get that much denser row of 11 dwellings across the site, 10 of which would be under this application. And again, you begin to see those that views through into those trees more associated with that parkland. And again, this is just taken from the top of this field. So this is a field entrance here. So you can see that the hedgerow runs in this section, but there is again this gap for this where this field entrance is. And I would say all along here at this time of year particularly, you can see it all the way along here. But yeah, this is taken from that field entrance, and this is taken from approximately 370 metres away from the site. So it is appearing very prominently within that wider landscape. So I think when we're looking at the densities and we're talking about that landscape and that character, it's that much more rural setting that we're looking at in this location here. So in terms of the application, so the proposal is entirely for market dwellings. Due to the size of the site and the number of dwellings, it would trigger the requirement for affordable housing. A viability appraisal has been provided by the applicants, which has been reviewed by independent specialists. And they're set out, whilst we wouldn't be able to provide on-site affordable housing, a commuted sum could be provided of approximately 56,000, which could go towards affordable housing or open space on the site. So that came out through that independent specialist advice that we received. And the applicants have agreed that they would be willing to pay that commuted sum. As I set out, the original 7 dwellings was permitted when the councils were unable to demonstrate a land supply, and significant weight was given to the self-build elements and the passive house standard. And that design, which was also proposed to create that more spacious, loose crescent form, allowing those views through between the agricultural land and the parkland setting. In terms of where we are up to now, obviously the council doesn't currently have a 5-year housing land supply, so we have considered that as part of this application. In terms of the benefits of the scheme, this scheme would bring additional housing. We would just set out that 7 dwellings are already permitted on this site and remain extant, so in terms of the weight for the additional housing, we would be particularly looking at those 4 additional houses being provided. And there'd also be small-scale economic benefits in terms of during the construction phase of it and from the spending from people who live in those dwellings going forward. When looking at the 5-year land supply, we have considered that in terms of the harms. We need to balance that up almost in terms of set of scales, in terms of the harms that are being identified. As officers, we have concerns in terms of the density and layout of the development, which we consider result in a cramped, urbanised scheme, which failed to reflect the rural setting of the area and failed to take those advantages, reflect that landscape character. In our view, this is contrary to the requirements in terms of design of policy GC4 of the development management policies, policy 2 of the Greater Norwich Local Plan, and policies 1 and 2 of the Neighbourhood Plan, and the requirements of the MPPF. So, in our view, we think that those harms outweigh the benefits from this scheme. We have sought to work with the applicants to try to come up with a scheme that may be acceptable, which, you know, we've discussed looking at the numbers across the site. Could we reduce the numbers on the site so it would still be above the previous consent of 7, but slightly lower than 11? Could we come up with a scheme that, you know, feels that less dense, less urbanised form? And unfortunately, it's not been possible to agree a revision to the proposal. So on that basis, we are recommending sort of the scheme to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. Would the committee like anything clarified by the officer? Jo first, please.
Thank you, Chair. Sarah, you said that Plot A has been sold. So why isn't that outside the red line? And did the new owner of Plot A change the orientation, or was it the applicant of this application, please?
So it was the owner of Plot A. They were happy to change the orientation. So we were previously going to bring this application to committee before, and we did have some concerns with how the position of Plot A was positioned in this development. It would have resulted in quite a lot of overlooking of some of those neighbouring plots. The owner was happy to change that rotation, working with the applicants for this scheme. I don't know whether, so it's part of the red line. I'm not sure whether fully it's all been sold completely, which is why it's still part of the red line at the moment. Whether that's still going through that process.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for your presentation, Sarah. Good morning, everyone. A couple of points. You pointed out there was a pond there. Have we any indication of any wildlife that survives in that pond? Also, I just want to clarify. So we've given, one's been built and there's permission been given for four more. Am I correct? And what were could you just clarify the locations on the map as to where they would be? Thanks.
So the original consent is this top consent. So the total consent is for 7. So I think where you're going, we've got to 4 is the plot numbers have changed slightly through the scheme. So it's this plot, which was originally known as plot 3. Yep. This has been built under the new scheme that we're looking at now. The applicants have labelled that plot 4, but it doesn't form part of that scheme. So this one is the one that has been built. And this one, as rotated, hasn't been built, but they have got a sale agreed on that, and again the applicants are here, so probably can update you. So it's these 2. Right. So that's 7, but the rest would be there. In terms of the site ecology survey.
No objection.
Yeah, so we have sorry, I'm just checking with Matthew. We have consulted with ecology on that, and they don't have any objections in terms of the ecology process.
Anybody else? Ken.
What is the time scale for these other 2 houses to be built? Because they've been given permission, haven't they? And they haven't started anything yet, as I understood from what you said. So what is the time scale for them to be built?
So they've started the one that we saw. Yes. So and that one is complete and that is occupied. So that original consent was a full planning consent. So that application remains live and extant because they have built that dwelling. Now, obviously, we're in a slightly different proposal now as an outline scheme, which would change the time limits. But that extant full consent remains live. So they can go and they can still build those sites and those dwellings.
Thank you.
When did the second house come to? I remember that coming to planning. The plots that's not built yet. When was that?
So that one, so the design, I'm going to pass to Matthew here on this potentially. So the design is still agreed under that original consent, so it doesn't need to come back to planning. That design has been agreed in terms of.
That's less than 3 years, isn't it? Sorry. That's less than 3 years ago, isn't it?
So the consent for the 7 dwellings was granted originally in 2018, and that gave them full planning permission. We have had some variations to that along the way, but obviously they have enacted that consent, so they can still build out the rest of that consent.
So I think just to clarify, you wouldn't have seen that a subsequent application because you approved the full details of the original scheme.
As I'm late, I'm eligible to include in this discussion. Okay, so I would like to declare to interest. I got an email from the applicant regarding this application. Hope that stock will receive, and also regarding the second application, I'm one of the town councillor, and I was there on the committee when the application was considered. However, I haven't involved or comment on the application. Thank you.
If there's no further questions for the officer, no? Okay, Joe.
Thank you very much, Chair. Sarah, you said earlier that when the original 2016 application for the 7 dwellings was granted, we could not demonstrate a 5-year land supply. Now the Greater Norwich local plan has been adopted, we obviously can demonstrate a 5-year land supply. Could you just clarify that? Thank you.
So We can't demonstrate a 5-year housing land supply at the moment. And Tracy may pick up on some of this, not that I'm passing the ball or anything here. So we can't demonstrate a 5-year land supply at the moment. Where we've got to in this report is, and that's largely due to the impact of nutrient neutrality and the delays that has caused in being able to, schemes being able to come forward. So in terms of nutrient neutrality, in areas affected by nutrients, unless we've got a mitigation solution that has been secured, we are not applying the tilted balance in terms of the 5-year housing land supply because of that impact on those European protected sites. In this instance, and where we've got a slightly different difference is there is a mitigation scheme proposed. Natural England have been consulted on it and they've confirmed they are happy with it. Now, we haven't completed the Section 106 agreement on that yet. And that's not big, so it's not finally secured, so we've not applied the tilted balance, but bearing in mind the fact that we know that there is a solution that could be achieved, we've written the report to include, if we are carrying out that tilted balance, and I think it's important for members to carry out that balance in their decision making, how you would view the scheme.
Okay, anybody else? No? Oh, Nigel, come on.
Apologies. So if we were to approve this, are the remaining buildings going to be as stark looking as the one that's already being built? Because that is really looks more like an industrial building than a country dwelling.
So obviously that was the original design concept for for that sort of 7 plots. That sort of slightly modernist villa style, I'll describe it as, sort of flat roof style. As self-built, and that's important to consider, there is that ability for individual owners to consider around what they want their dwellings to look at. Where the plot passport approach comes in is it provides that guidelines for, you know, where your 2-storey elements can be, where your single-storey elements can be. So it provides a bit of a guideline to how high the development can go. So there will be a bit of flexibility in the design. So we don't quite know the final design. So they'd all have to come forward and they'd likely come forward as individual reserve matters on each application. So there is a bit of there's a framework for the design, but there's not this is what the design has to be, is what I'd say.
Okay, I'm going to call we have no town and parish, we have no objectors. I'm going to call the applicant, Joe Wiley, and the agent, Nicole Wright. Would you like to come to the front, please? I understand you're both speaking. Is that correct? Okay, well, Nicole, you have 5 minutes from when you start.
Good morning, Chair, members. It's always a pleasure to stand here before you. I am Nicole Wright, Head of Planning at Rural Solutions, and I have been working with the applicant since 2007, although, of course, this particular application has been in since 2023. On reflecting on how to address you this morning, I really had to think hard about how to articulate the duration that this application has taken and the hard work that the applicant has put in to ensure that all the statutory comments on the application have been addressed before the application came before you. And of course, we are all here to serve the same purpose, to ensure that that presumption in favour of sustainable development is met, and that applications are approved which fulfil that presumption. The site is in a sustainable location, and that's not disputed by the officers or the applicant. That is an established fact. Of course, planning law requires applications for planning permission to be determined in accordance with the development plan unless material considerations indicate otherwise. The material considerations in this case include, as was in the email from the original case officer, Helen Bowman, that the tilted balance would apply in this case, given that the application was submitted in December 2023. And at that point, there was no 5-year land supply. With the increase in the housing numbers and the new target set by national government in December last year, we are in a very similar position to that was the case when the application was first before you and the original consent granted in 2018. So the material considerations include that tilted balance. It also includes the fact that we have already established the principle of development in this location by approving the first development for 7 units, establishing that this is a sustainable location for housing. The officer showed you a view of the site from various vantage points and the view of the existing dwelling that's already been constructed. Of course, that dwelling is a lot larger than the ones that are currently proposed, and the consent that's in place, the extant consent, if that were to be implemented in full, implementing the other 6 dwellings of that same size, you would have, you can imagine that, the view of that compared to what is being proposed at the moment. And the scheme being proposed is more affordable to local people. They're smaller dwellings. There are only 3 more dwellings than only in the application for 10. The uplift is only 3 additional dwellings, although, of course, it will be a total of 4 more dwellings than were originally consented because we have one already constructed. To answer Councillor Copplestone's question, the reason why Unit 8 is back into the scheme is because there is case law that if you are to implement a new consent following existence of an extant consent, it could nullify the original consent, and that would mean that Plot 8, although completely sold, completed, and no longer in the client's demise, it could mean that implementing the new consent for 11 dwellings would nullify that old consent. So we've included Plot 8 to ensure that that can be delivered in due course. And the scale of that is, of course, as per the owner's wish, but the orientation of that has been changed in line with the Heritage and Design Officer's comments to ensure that all the properties are aligned similarly. The report sets out 3 reasons for refusal, and those 3 reasons are the cramped nature of the development and 2 reasons linked to the fact that there isn't a Section 106 that is signed. The applicant has already submitted a Section 106. As you know, that's with the officers, and for consideration, the applicant can't complete that Section 106 without input from officers. It requires input from officers in order to complete that Section 106. With regards to the cramped nature of the development, the applicant is proposing a density of 4 dwellings per hectare. For those of us who have been involved in planning for a little while, when
I'm sorry, Ms. Wright, your 5 minutes is up.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any clarification from the speaker? Yes, Eleanor, yes.
Yes, if I may, I have some questions. The first is, you already have full planning permission for 7 dwellings on the site.
Yeah.
Would you be able to explain a little bit more clearly as to why you want to increase the number of dwellings on the site, please? Thank you.
Of course. So the reason for proposing to increase the number of dwellings on the site is because having constructed the first dwelling to the Passive House Plus standards, the cost of constructing that dwelling to that standard at that scale is not viable. And the dwelling was sold for substantially less. There is no one on the market who will buy any of the other plots to deliver the permission that has been granted for the 7 dwellings. It has been on, as it was consented in 2018, and as you can see, only 1 property has been built out. And the viability appraisal has been independently assessed and demonstrates that the minimum number of dwellings that could be viable is 11. And so that only shows a surplus of that 56,000, which could be provided as a commuted sum, which is proposed to be paid as a commuted sum. But of course, self-build properties don't require affordable housing because they're exempt, but that contribution is still being proposed.
And if I may, I've just got another question. In the original full application, the houses were going to be built according to passive house standards. It seems now that they won't be, presumably for financial reasons, that presumably maybe it's too expensive to do that. So what exactly what requirement would be placed on these new dwellings, if they're approved, for them to be built as highly sustainable homes? Will they still be very sustainable?
Yes, so the building regulations, which has been changed, is very similar, is a lot more improved than it was originally. And so the standard of building that you would get, even if you were to only build to building reg standard, is very high and highly thermally efficient. And it's not being said that they won't necessarily be built to passive house standard. It's just saying that as a mandatory requirement, it's putting off anybody from purchasing the plots. Whereas people may choose to still build to that standard. It's just asking that it not be a mandatory requirement of the consent. Thank you.
Ian?
Chairman, I'm a little confused because I thought planning permission had also been given for plot 8. Is that right? Because that's been sold.
As the lady said, it's included in the application because it's included in the application, isn't it? Because if it wasn't, then permission could be refused for it. Is that correct?
Yeah, let me just clarify. So the agent's correct. So they've got consent for plot 8, but if they construct that, then it's the way it's a hillside judgment. Some case law that came out about 2 years ago. So what they need to do is to include that plot in the new planning permission, so they can implement that whole permission without affecting if they were to construct it, there are potentially some issues in terms of the validity of the planning permission.
Thank you.
Ken, can you tell us?
Oh, sorry.
Thank you very much for your presentation, Nicole. That was really interesting. I'm just looking at 5.46 to 5.48, and this is to do with contributions that the development would bring forward. Originally, with the original self-bills, it looks in 5.48 that the application would provide £128,000 of contributions. I just wondered whether that had been paid already. And then it has been said in this meeting that there would be a £56,000 contribution to affordable housing. And then in 5.47, there would be an estimated 68,500 for open spaces, and that's to do with the number of bedrooms and the number of people that are able to occupy these properties. So that comes roughly about 124, 125,000, whereas the original development suggested that there would be 128,000. Also, with the affordable housing, if you look at the end of 5.46, it says that if all these dwellings are going to be self-bills, the applicants could apply for an exemption. So there is a bit of greyness there. I need to be assured that £56,000 will be, the authority will get some community infrastructure levy in some way, whether it's through a 106 agreement and the open space contribution. And then there's the question of the other 128, if you could just clear that up. Also, one other thing which is completely unrelated, plot 8, which has been sold, which was formerly plot 6, is that going to be a white villa, the same as what is now plot 4, please?
So that is consented as similar to plot 4, yes, and of course it's outside the demise of the applicant. Yes, it's unless
if members can officers can just clarify some of those points. Councillor Coppeston.
Yeah, so in terms of this section 106, so I think the original section 106 that did include that requirement for 128,000. That was based on the viability of the scheme at that time. There would have been trigger points within that section 106 development for when that money would have had to come over. And apologies, I don't quite know the position of whether any of that money has been received or not, but I'm sure the applicants can tell us. But it would be in accordance with the section 106 trigger points that are in there. In terms of the viability appraisals that have been undertaken for this this application. So the scheme has had a new viability appraisal for the 10 dwellings that are proposed on this scheme. That's been, so the applicants have provided that, we have then reviewed that, and the independent assessor that we used has come up with a number of amendments to the scheme that was put forward by the applicants. So that has set out that the scheme is viable and that a contribution of £56,000 could be made, which the applicants have agreed to. So that could go towards either affordable housing or open space. So it's not both. So it's a lower contribution than was originally proposed. And that is solely based on the viability of the scheme. And so we've independently assessed that to make sure that, you know, we can get as much as we can do for the community. So in terms of that, so that'd be 56,000 in a pot, and that could go towards affordable housing or open space. In terms of affordable housing or then on self-build scheme, which I think is picked up our enabling officer, we wouldn't normally require it on the scheme itself. And again, with only 56,000, we wouldn't actually be able to achieve a dwelling itself. So there'd be that consideration of where we'd want that money to go towards. I think the total requirement, if we were to not look at viability, is they would obviously be required to provide a greater amount in terms of open space and a greater amount in terms of affordable housing, but that is not being possible based on that viability appraisal. So what they are offering is the amount that our independent assessor has said, 56,000, which we could then secure that via that 106. Does that make sense? Have I confused the matter?
Yeah, so in 5.47 it mentions 68,500 just over, based on 5 plots being 5 bedroom and 4 plots being 4 bedroom. Is this in addition to the 56,000? No, it's not.
No, that's not.
Okay.
So that is what they, if everything being good, that's what it should be providing.
Right.
But based on the viability, the maximum they can provide, that viability appraiser is saying is 56,000.
Can I just clarify for members as well? I think there's just a few points in terms of some of the comments that have been made. So I just want to kind of just clarify some few matters. The agent has, I think, commented around that self-build doesn't require affordable housing. It does. So there is a requirement, there's a policy requirement for affordable housing. You asked the question around SIL. So self-build can have an exemption for SIL if they make the application to do so. So you could see, obviously, with an application for self-build that you get no SIL at all from the development, and you obviously receive £56,000 in total for Section 106 contributions. I just wanted to also note, just in terms of the tilted balance that the agent had picked up around kind of what that test is, that has changed since the original application, and we've seen a new MPPF in terms of what the wording of the tilted balance is. I think just to kind of be clear, what your tilted balance requires you to do is to approve unless the adverse impacts will significantly and demonstrably outweigh those benefits. But importantly, in the new MPPF, it does also make sure that you have particular regard to key policies directing development to sustainable locations, making effective use of land, securing well-designed places and providing affordable homes. So you do need to have regard to that in terms of how you are engaging your tilted balance. And finally, just in terms of just reminding you around, you know, you do have to apply a tilted balance. Previously, obviously, significant weight was given to passive house. You obviously haven't got that, so you've got a new set of benefits and harms to balance. I would say in terms of you must give weight to the viability, because that's a material consideration you must give weight to. The weight you give to that is for the decision maker to give the appropriate weight to that. So I think that was just a few points just in terms of what the agent had picked up. I just wanted to clarify for you.
Yeah, thank you for that clarification. Bill, you have a question?
Thank you, Chair. If
plot 8 is going to be built the same as plot 4 in a
Bill, can I just
rural
ask, is this for
location.
the speakers?
Pardon?
Is this question for the speakers? Okay,
If
thank
it's
you.
going to be built, plot 8 is going to be built in the same construction as plot 4, that looks really unsightly in a rural area.
Plot 8, although the red line incorporates it into this application, it is really just to ensure that what is consented, the extant consent, is taken into account in this application and reconsented effectively. But this application cannot propose to change the proposal of plot 8 simply because it's outside of the demise of the applicant.
Okay, if there's no further questions, would you like to return to your seats, please? Thank you. Oh, I'm sorry. Sorry, Joe. Didn't see your hand up.
Thank you very much, Chair. I did ask earlier because the existing 2016 application, there was amount payable of 128,000 to open space contributions. I need to know whether that has been. So usually with SIL, for example, it's on commencement of building work. So have the council received any of that 128, please? Thank you.
Yes, I was mindful I hadn't replied to your question as yet. So the council has received some money in relation to this development, but it was in relation to SIL because the first plot built, plot 4 currently, was not built by the person who's occupying it. So it was built by the applicant, and so the SIL did apply, and the SIL was paid in relation to that plot. However, with regards to the commuted sums payable, the 128,000 within the Section 106, the trigger for that was on the construction of the 5th plot. And so because the development hasn't progressed to that stage as yet, that commuted sum hasn't been triggered, and so that 128 has not yet been paid. Thank you.
Right, clarify. Anybody else? No. Okay, would you like to return to your seat, please? Thank you. Right, we go to full discussion, please. Who would like to start? You go, Ken.
Well, I must admit, I am a bit confused because in your thinking about the reason for refusal, I assume you were aware of the viability challenge. And am I right in saying that you, after the discussions you've had, you are still backing the refusal? But were you aware of this viability question when was it 7 houses were approved in 2016? Or maybe I've got it wrong, but I must admit I'm confused.
So yes, we are recommending refusal, just to clarify that point. In terms of the viability, I think the situation has slightly changed, and I think you heard a little bit from the applicant about the costs associated with the development of passive house standard is probably higher than potentially even the applicants imagined at that stage. So we've then had to reassess this application as a whole as a new. So we've taken the 10 houses that are coming forward, and we've assessed that separately in terms of viability at this stage. So I can't really talk too much about what's happened in the past, but this is where we are now in terms of the viability. The situation has moved on, I would say, considerably since that original consent was granted. And so that's where we've gone to. So the applicants have provided a couple of viability appraisals, and then we've independently done a viability appraisal with an independent expert on it. And that's where he has reviewed it as a whole, and he has come up with that it is viable, but there's only a contribution of community sum for 56,000.
Correct, Ken. If I can just clarify as well, so just because something's unviable doesn't mean it automatically is acceptable. You still have to look at the wider harms, and you give appropriate weight to that viability appraisal. So there is that balance of the viability ensures that a scheme can come forward in the form that the applicant's proposing, i.e. more houses. We've identified the level of harm, and in weighing all those things, we are still concluding that that harm outweighs the benefits having regard to viability.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I had to think quite a lot about this application because it's not completely straightforward. I think, to be honest, it's unfortunate it has come forward in my view. It would have been an awful lot better had the initial application for 7, which was approved in 2018, been built out as it was designed. So at least now I've had clarification here that the reasons for this are mainly financial. And my concern is that costs of construction will continue to rise. So this is only going to become it's only an ongoing issue. The site's brownfield. There's already been some development on it. It's not as though we're looking at an application for a greenfield site in a, on an agricultural field. So that the issue, it seems, really is the scale and layout of the properties and their impact on the landscape. Because, as I said, we already have, the site's already got full planning permission for 7 properties. I do know where this site is, and I have to say I think it would be good after these years to see this site properly developed and finished. It is unfortunate to look at it at the moment where you've got one sort of large house in the middle of a green space and one to be built, but we've already got the infrastructure put in on the site. There are positive benefits. There's a positive benefit to providing self-built houses in the district. Broadland at the moment isn't able to demonstrate a 5-year housing land supply. I do accept it's not going to be Passive House certified, which is a disappointment, because that was a really important part of the original application. But having heard today that the houses will still be energy efficient, sounds like pretty energy efficient, that is positive. I don't think, although we've seen an increase, we're looking at an increase in the number of dwellings, I don't actually think they're really that cramped. I guess I'm looking at it in terms of, I understand it's a rural area, but I'm thinking in terms of the housing development on the other side of the road is extremely dense, and that's in a rural area, extremely dense in relation to this one, shall I say. I can't see any serious objections from the majority of consultees. The positioning of plot 8 has been altered, and I think that's a big improvement. Now that's been repositioned. It is in a sustainable location. It's on a bus route and a cycle path. It's already opposite, as I said, a large housing development that's already been built out. We've got a nutrient neutrality solution proposed, so that's a good point. There'll be an upgrade from the current. There's 2 septic tanks there at the moment to a private packaged treatment plant, so that would be an improvement. The negatives are there'll be no affordable housing built as part of this development, which is disappointing. But I understand the reason why. And the change in design. Yeah, the design isn't as good as the previous one. I mean, there is a change from a crescent to a linear form. And, it could be argued that the new layout isn't as sensitive to the buildings nearby, the manor house and the octagon barn. So overall, there will be some negative impacts on the landscape, and it is a rural site. But the site has permission for 7 dwellings already. It will provide housing for the district. Weighing it up, I don't consider the harm of this development going ahead to outweigh the public benefits. So it's in an acceptable, sustainable location. That's already been agreed. So it's a really difficult one, but I'm tending towards that I would go for this site to be approved.
I think I'm going to counteract that. Mm-hmm. I think the development as it is too tight. We cannot compare that with the housing development nearby. That's completely different. This development is in open setting, is in parkland. And I think the density is too tight there. And I'm disappointed that the planning and the agent could not come up with a better solution to this. I am leaning to refusal. But Jo, thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'm really concerned that that plot 4 has been built out. It is a big white villa. It is quite stunning in the landscape. I've seen it when I visited the Octagon Barn. And also plot 8 has been sold, and it will also possibly be developed into a big white villa. And then we will have 3 little houses at the end, 3 in the middle and 3 on the end, which could be self-builds, and they could, you know, we are just getting these plot passports through, but they could be very different in their appearance, and it will look fairly incongruous within the landscape. So that is my main concern. I'm also concerned that there is no affordable housing here. I know that when the original application was approved, there should be an infiltration pond. That hasn't been built yet. And although SIL has been received for plot 4, which is now for the villa that had been built, I am concerned that the council will only receive 56,000 towards affordable rather than the 128 for open space. So on balance, I think I'm not particularly happy with the appearance of how that's going to appear close to a grade 2 listed building and within a parkland setting. So I'm not really, I don't think this is very favourable. Thank you.
Thank you, Jo. I appreciate your comments, but just to say that the correction, there is the pond, infiltration pond there. Yeah.
Sorry.
It's next to the one that's not been built yet. Okay, Peter.
Thank you. Yeah, so like the chair and the vice chair, we seem to be coming at different points on this and different arguments. Obviously, this seems to the application is to be guided by financial concerns for the increase in the numbers of the houses. I hear what Councillor Laming has been saying, and I agree with her just to a certain extent. But again, I agree with what the chair has said. You've got a situation, this is in a very rural area. You've got a footpath that is going to afford, as very, to my mind, very incongruous view across the rural landscape. My concern, though, is if we don't give permission for this, what is going to happen to that site? You've got permission for 7, but are they actually going to go ahead? Is it going to stand vacant for years and, well, just deteriorate? At the moment, I'm leaning towards listening to the officer's advice and to go for refusal. Thank you.
I presume if they're not built, you can reseed it and put it back to parkland. I don't know. Yeah. Anybody else would like to comment before we go to the vote? No? Okay. I propose that we go for the officer's recommendation of refusal. All those in favour of refusal, please raise your hand.
7, Chair.
Thank you, that's carried. Thank you.
So I'm
Are you against?
as opposed to abstain.
Yeah. Right, we go on to the second application in Sproston, 183 185 Roxham Road. And we have Martin Clark presenting. Thank you, Martin.
Thank you, Chair. So the application site we've got here is an existing dentist which occupies 183 and 185, a pair of semi-detached properties. So you can see here, so there are residential residential properties to either side of the site. So you can see here, the blue little squares are the existing air conditioning units. So you've got 2 existing on the front there, and then there's 4 existing units to the rear. This one's on the rear wall. These 3 sit on a flat roof. There will be 2 additional units proposed here, so there will be one on top of each other on that wall there, and there will be 3 additional units here again on another flat roof, but set centrally within the site, so located further away from the neighbours either side. The black squares that you see down this side are 3 units that were installed without permission. There was a condition on the permission for the dentist that they should submit details for any AC units. That didn't happen, so they are seeking to regularise that. But they are moving those units, so they will be moved from that position to the position that you see here. I'll show you some photos so it's a bit clearer where they're going. So again, this is just the elevations to show 2 new units on the front, existing units, again existing units to the rear and proposed, and these are the units that are being relocated from the side wall here. So you can see that's one of the existing units to the front, and then 2 additional units will be placed there, sort of behind that pillar. We've got the other existing there, and these are the 3 units to the side which had been placed at first floor level, so above the fence line between the properties there. So again, that's the 3 at first floor level. 2 will be relocated onto this wall here, so facing to the rear. 1 will be in this position here where the bike is. So they will be set lower at ground floor level, a little bit further away from the neighbour. 2 will be facing to the rear rather than facing towards the neighbouring property, and you'll obviously have the fence which will provide some barrier to the noise. So again, you can see here, existing units, 1 on the rear wall. You can see 4 in this image there. That one there in the middle is disconnected, so is no longer in use, so there are just those 3. And there will be 3 additional units on this flat roof here. So we'll just go back to the front. So in assessing the impact in terms of the character and appearance of the area, we've obviously got 2 additional units on the front here. You've got the 2 existing as well. They are set at low level. The property is set well back from the road. You've got the parking area in front as well. You've got this beam. So they're not overly visible, so we don't consider that there is a significant impact on the character and appearance of the area. So we consider from that view it is acceptable. We have got these ones to the side which will be repositioned, so they'll be out of view, so that also helps in that respect. Obviously the main issue is the noise impact on the neighbours, and that's the objections that we've had. The application submitted a noise assessment, so that assessed. It was amended so that it did include all of the existing and proposed units. Originally it didn't, but we wanted to have that assessment of the cumulative impact of all of the units on the site. So that assessment looks at, on the basis of all of the units operating, what the impact would be. So there was 4 assessment locations in that assessment. Assessment location 1, you can just about see there's a window here to the neighbour's property. So assessment location 1 is there. The noise assessment provided said that the sound level would be equal to the background noise. So Roxham Road is quite a busy road, so the background noise is higher than in a lot of other places, so there is quite high background noise there already. The assessment says that it would be equal to background noise at that position. Assessment location 2 was the front window, the closest front window of this neighbour. and we've got 14 decibels below background at that point. At assessment level, location 3, which is the nearest windows of the neighbour on the other side, it would be even lower than that. And within the rear garden of number 181, so to the other side, it would be 2 decibels below background. So out of the 4 most sensitive locations, the closest one would be equal to background noise level. At all the other assessment locations, it would be less than the background noise levels. We've consulted with the council's environmental quality team. They've raised no objections. They asked for a condition for the hours of use, so we've included that condition so that they can only be used when the dentist is in operation, so it wouldn't run in the evenings or on Sundays. So on that basis, given that we don't consider there to be any significant impacts in terms of character and appearance, and we consider that on the basis of the noise assessment provided and the environmental quality comments, that there isn't a significant impact on neighbour amenity, we're recommending approval.
Thank you, Martin. Can I ask in total how many AC units are on the building? Fourteen
14.
units. Okay, seems rather a lot. Peter.
Thanks, Chair. Can I just clarify, 183 and 185, they're both for the dentists, are they?
Yes.
I'm just wondering whether they're expanding and need these, or it's to increase the comfort of the existing users of the dentists.
Yeah, so the applicant said that they'd needed to serve individual rooms, so because of the room locations, they can't locate all of the units to the rear, so they obviously have to be close enough to the rooms that they're serving.
And just to clarify, those units on the side, do they need planning permission to be put up?
The ones that are to be repositioned?
Yes.
So there was a condition on the permission for the dentist that required them to submit details before they installed any. They didn't submit details, they installed them, and this is now obviously looking to deal with that.
There's no questions for the officer. I'm going to call Mr. Peter Leggett. If you'd like to come to the...
Before I go up, am I allowed to ask Martin a question?
You have 5 minutes to give your statement.
I'm not allowed to ask him a question because...
No, I'm afraid not.
As far as I'm aware, none of those units, apart from 2 at the front, have been approved.
Mr. Leggett, if you'd just like to come up and have your... Okay, Mr. Leggett, if you press the right-hand button to speak, and you have 5 minutes from when you start.
Good morning, Madam Chair and Committee. I would like to start by reminding you that we have expressed our concern about noise levels of various extractions from the dentist in emails since the 16th of August 2019. Also to remind you of one of your conditions for planning application for previous planning application, which the dentist is in breach of, and your planning approval condition stated on the 7th of July 2022 said in item number 4, no additional air extraction equipment shall be installed on the site without precise details of the equipment being submitted to and approved of in writing by the local planning authority. Reasons for the condition: in the interest of the amenities of adjoining residents in accordance with your policy PC4 of the Broadland Development Management DPD 2015. I first informed your planning enforcement of preparation holes being drilled through the northeast wall of the new extension on the 25th of July 2023, and since then 14 air conditioning units have been allowed to be installed without planning permission and building control not policing the conditions of the planning approval. There must be some loophole in the planning laws that should be filled to stop this taking place, which is the reason why this retrospective planning permission is being sought by Dr. Zain Shamoon, the dentist, who is a law unto himself and will continue to push the boundaries of planning applications with his underhand approach, and hope he gets away with retrospective planning permission. Whilst we fully appreciate the dentist is supposed to be a community service, they are not good neighbours and they have been a nuisance. Today, we are mainly concerned with the noise from the 3 air conditioning units already installed on the northeast wall. Today, these 3 units being proposed to be moved to a corner a few feet along the wall but at lower level within the passageway through to the back gardens and still opposite our windows where the noise is still reverberating and causing a nuisance, not allowing us to open windows in our lounge, utility kitchen, downstairs toilet and the door to our entrance lobby without a constant droning from the fans in the better weather. If these 3 air conditioning units were moved to the rear wall of 185 to a low level under the surgery window, the noise would then hopefully dissipate into their back garden and be less disruptive. Alternatively, you could consider that these 3 units be removed completely. If these retrospective plans, as they stand, are to be approved today, could we request that the planning approval condition clause be added to state that the 3 units causing the disturbance, that they must be fitted with acoustic enclosures and a restriction of their hours of use. Also that an audible noise check be carried out by an environmental health officer to assess noise impact after 2 months. During the last 2 years, our everyday lives have been affected by droning of the air conditioning units. Your enforcement and environmental officers have asked the dentist to not use these, but due to the loopholes, the dentists still choose to ignore the advice and continue using them. Living next door to the dentist with the air conditioning units working is like living in a humming top and is having a significant daily adverse effect on both myself and my wife's health and quality of life, which nobody should endure. We sincerely hope that you give serious due diligence to our plight when you consider this retrospective planning application. All we wish for is that our daily lives be returned to normality. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Leggett. In the report, it says that the units would not exceed the background noise. I know Roxton Road is a very busy road. How far is your front of your house from the road?
From the front of the road?
Yeah. Would you say it's 20 feet?
7, about 12 metres, I suppose.
12 metres, okay. And how far away from your house is these units?
About 1 metre.
1 metre. So would you say the road from the noise is worse, or the road from the units are worse for you?
This droning, this continuous droning noise is.
It is, okay.
And where people come along and they do all these assessments with all their machines and microphones, etc., etc., and even Martin, I would like to invite him to come to our house and live in our house for that period of time. And if you're sitting there, you're reading a magazine or on your iPad, you got this in the background.
Okay, thank you. Any questions from or any comments from the panel? Peter?
Well, it's just an observation, really, and I have great sympathy for Mr. Leggett. I have great sympathy for you if you having to put up with that. No, there's nothing worse than a constant noise. You can't escape it. It's dreadful. I have great sympathy, and Mr. Leggett does seem to have some very positive points to make. I just wonder whether they could be taken into consideration either by the dentist or our planning team regarding the repositioning of these units to try and alleviate the problem that they're so enduring.
Can I just reply to that? The information that Martin Clark has given you, I think, is wrong, in as far as the only two existing air conditioning units were the old 2 units that John and Anne Friend had from their 2 surgeries. The rest of the air conditioning units have been installed without planning permission, even the red and the blue ones on here. I've seen nothing come through from Broadland Council about planning permission for them, and if Martin Clark could give us a date when they were approved, that would be much appreciated.
I take it you're just to the right of these?
We are, we're 1A7, yeah. Yeah, we've got the fence or the passageway going through to our back garden. You got the fence, and they're about that much inside the fence, the other side.
Have we got a picture to show how close they are or not, Martin?
And Chairman, could we have the answer to the question? What's the assessment done before the new equipment was in?
So the assessment has been carried out on the basis of all of the existing and proposed units. So the 3 units that you can see in this image are the ones that are going to be relocated further to the rear into this area here.
Yeah, the assessment, I agree the assessments were done. I don't dispute that we had the assessment man come round, their independent assessment man came round to see us. But none of those units, apart from the 2 at the front, which you had in red, I think, have not been approved by this council.
Can I just clarify? So there's a number of questions that I think that have been raised, so I just want to address the committee. So whether or not those units have been approved, this planning application seeks to regularise all of the units on the site. So if you look at the description, there's a whole series of different AC units that are being regularised. So it covers all of that. So the assessments that have been undertaken cover cumulative impacts of all of the AC units on the site. So when we're looking at noise, it's the cumulative effect of all of those, which, as the officer said, the initial assessment that came in wasn't considering all cumulative, and we asked for that to be retested, and it's been done so we can ensure that the cumulative effects have been considered. The neighbour has raised a number of points in terms of what could we consider around. I think there were 3 things: acoustic enclosure, hours of operation, and an audit after 2 months of installation for those 3 that are closest to his property. What I would say in terms of the measures around acoustic enclosures, you have an assessment in terms of a noise assessment that's carried out that has accepted and suggested that it's below background noise levels, and that acoustic buffering isn't necessary. And you've got your consultee in terms of your environmental services team that are agreeing that position. Hours of operation, we are already recommending hours of operation on as a condition. So that's daylight hours, and I think we can just get Martin to clarify that. So we're not talking overnight. So background noise levels in terms of the road noise clearly will be during the day and obviously higher at peak hours. So that would be consistent in terms of the hours of operation of the AC units themselves. I think the question in terms of whether or not you grant permission and then require an audit after 2 months, that's really difficult because you've granted permission. You should consider whether or not the impact is acceptable upon grant. There are scenarios you could grant a temporary consent, but that's really only if you don't understand the impacts of that and want to test that for a particular period before it comes back. You know, you would normally grant at least 6 months of that to be able to consider that impact. What I would say is you have a noise assessment that's understood that impact, and so therefore I'm not quite sure what you would achieve after a 6-month period. So I think, yeah, I think that's the points that were made on that.
Mr. Leggett, you're welcome to go back to your seat, please. Thank you.
Still didn't answer the question though.
Okay, we go to discussion on this. Bevan.
Well, there is no doubt we need to encourage and support our community services like dentists, surgeries, and other facilities in the town. However, it is equally important the welfare of or the well-being of the community member. So, if you allow the permission to relocate that 3 units, and well, the neighbor is after relocating, the neighbor is still experiencing the same issue. I'm not too prejudiced, but is there any chance after 6 months we could make a condition, include a condition that we could reassess the situation, and the noise still persists? We will advise them to relocate. Is there any way we can incorporate that in the condition?
I think there's 2 possibilities there. So one, you decide that you consider today that you have a concern with the impact on those 3 particular units. You could decide to give delegated authority to officers to go and have those further conversations with the applicant to seek changes, and then bring that back to committee if we can resolve that. Mm-hmm. You could grant a temporary consent for a 6-month period, in which case the permission then expires and the applicant has to come back in to secure the consent. I wouldn't necessarily recommend that, because I'm not quite sure what evidence and what the difference is between the evidence that you'll have at that point and now, because you have a robust noise assessment that's demonstrated in terms of the background noise levels. Or, you know, finally, you could conclude this is an unacceptable noise impact and you refuse the application. However, I would kind of question that approach because of the evidence that we would need to defend that on appeal in terms of the noise assessment that's been submitted.
So, well, do you have any recorded noise, or Peter do you have any recorded noise to show that it is badly impact your daily life?
Councillor Baby, sorry, if we can direct that to officers, if obviously public speaking's finished now.
Okay, sorry. Does he got any recorded voice that we can just show us, you know, how much impact it will create on his daily life?
I mean, we don't have any recordings, but the assessment that is carried out, they use microphones obviously to measure the background noise levels. They have the information of what the AC units are, what sound they produce, and they use modelling to work out what that impact is going to be, but we don't have any recordings that we can play for you.
Okay. So one more thing, there is a lot of controlled noise AC, like AC units are available in the market. Why we are not encouraging, since there is a conflict, why we are not encouraging the dentist to go for that?
So I mean, they've applied for what they've applied for.
But there is a conflict there with the neighbor. So can we say planning authority, can you request the dentist to go for a noise controlled unit rather than the same unit?
So they're being moved. That's obviously how we're trying to reduce the impact. So they were previously refused in that position. That's why this application is looking to move them to reduce that impact. But we have to make an assessment of what they've applied for, and the noise assessment shows us what the impact is, and environmental quality have been consulted and have no objections to it. So from our view, the professional noise assessment, the environmental quality team have not had any objections to it, and on that basis that's why we've considered it to be acceptable.
Can I just add to that? We can only require what's reasonably necessary to mitigate the impact of development. So based on the noise assessment and our environmental services comments, we are asking what is reasonably necessary to mitigate. So what you are asking for is perhaps going beyond what would mitigate the impact of that scheme on amenity. So it's not to say that there aren't different solutions that are available, it's just based on what's been submitted and how we've assessed that, it does mitigate the impact, and that's the extent to which we can take. But having said, if members are concerned with that, then I guess my recommendation would be to seek authority to delegate or to defer and enable us to go and have further conversations so that we can bottom that out with the applicant to see if we can seek some improvements and then bring that back.
Sorry.
I think this is probably a very good example of a business in a residential area not communicating with their neighbours.
Can I continue, if you don't mind?
Sorry, Di, yeah.
In that scenario, can I request the council to issue a temporary license for 6 months? Because he didn't take a permission before they install, and now they're coming back as to regularize that. So why can't we give a temporary for 6 months? Then we can do an assessment and,
Are you talking about leaving those units on the site?
Sorry?
Are you talking about leaving the
No,
units on the site?
relocate it.
Relocate them.
Relocate it and give them 6 months time. So if their neighbor is happy, well, it's a community service. It should be make sure that the neighbor is also happy, So I recommend the council, to issue a temporary approval.
Can we leave that as it is?
Yes. Oh, sorry.
Joe.
Thank you very much, Chair. Obviously, this is a matter of balance, the balance between the needs of the neighbour who is currently being disturbed by the 3 high-level aircon units nearly on the boundary of his property, and the need of the dentist. The speaker, Mr Leggett, said that he would prefer the air conditioning units moved further along under the window that we can see, so noise is dispersed more into the back garden. And I think really the only contentious air conditioning units, it sounds like, is the ones on his boundary. So I don't think we should do this 6 month thing. I think that's just sort of it's just unreasonable to push this further on and defer this. We need to get this sorted today. Once those 3 high-level aircon units are moved to that wall, and maybe we could ask the officers to ensure that if they're still noisy, we could put some sort of enclosures around them. I think that would be sort of the best we can do. And then if Mr Leggett still has a problem, once the aircon units have been moved and maybe with the acoustic enclosures, then that would be another matter for environmental health, and the enforcement team would have to take that forward. So with that in mind, if Tracy is happy to put something into the report like that, I'd be happy to approve the application.
Personally, I think the only 3 contentious ones are the ones on the side, aren't they? Yeah, and the ones at the front and back are fine. But they're just... The only thing I wanted to say was the 3 on the side are still going to be moved to the side.
Yeah, but they're going to be at ground level. Yeah. So that you've got the shielding of the fence.
Yeah. I'm just conscious because it's opposite a window and a door, if it's going to cause problems, it's still going to cause problems. That's all I'm worried about.
I'm not prejudiced, but still, if
Ken next, please.
I was following really what Joe has said, and if that linked in with what Tracy said, I think I would support that. But Tracy, could I just get clarification? you heard what Joe said. Does that fit in with what one of the offers that, or suggestions, options you made?
Yes, sorry, we've been having a bit of a chat about it. So I think, having heard what you've said, I think what the solution would be to resolve that would be giving us delegated authority to approve, subject to changes to the location of those on that elevation to underneath that window, to include acoustic enclosures, because I think we would have to ask for that up front. But I also think that would need to have an updated noise assessment before we grant, just because what I'm mindful of is the acoustic enclosures haven't been tested, and with noise being a very odd thing to kind of consider, we don't know what the impact of doing those two things would have in terms of noise. So I wouldn't want to make those suggestions with people that aren't noise experts, and then actually it has a greater impact. So I think that would be a delegated authority to seek those changes, and then satisfactory confirmation from a noise assessment that resolves that matter, and then we could grant.
Does Joe agree with that?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I agree with the comments that Officer Lincoln has made. I think that's a very sensible solution to the problem, and I'm happy to propose we go with that. Thank you.
Peter, you wanted to speak, didn't you?
No, but my points have been, all the concerns have been covered, and I'm quite happy now, thank you.